Good evening and welcome to Nashville. I'm Alan Jackson. The first duty of government is to protect us, but in reality, without a truthful media and voices in leadership that are honest, the police cannot maintain safety. Open borders, cities without laws, we have created violence, and then we ask police to make us safe. Well, Charlie Kirk spoke frequently about the threats he and his Turning Point organization received, even as he raced around the country, meeting with as many students as he could. This fall's campus tour was called the American Comeback Tour, and he sat behind a simple table under a tent that said, "Prove me wrong." It was a very smart way of demonstrating the First Amendment to our young people. College is supposed to be about growing and learning and meeting new friends, football games and frisbees. But last week, the screams we heard weren't from sports. They were from terrified students running from a rifle shot. A suspect has been arrested. Utah has the death penalty, and the accused has admitted to friends that he did it. But what needs to be done to put together a legal case that ensures that justice is done? Well, our guest tonight is the Senior Legal Fellow at the Heritage Foundation, Charles Stimson. Welcome back, sir.
Thanks for having me, Alan.
There is a video of Tyler Robinson. There are DNA samples and text messages from his transgender roommate. He told his father that he'd rather die than be turned in, but he was turned in and he's behind bars now. The governor says that Robinson is not cooperating and they have him on a suicide watch. What else needs to be done to put together the case?
So, no doubt with all those kids in that audience, the FBI and the local officials are going through any videos that those kids have, and they'll upload that and comb through that to see if there's anything damning or exculpatory. Because remember, the government has the obligation to turn over potentially exculpatory information to the defense counsel. They'll look at, like in the Brian Kohlberger case, any cell site location information, which pings various cell towers as he went from UVU south to southern Utah and back. They'll look at video from highway patrol. They'll look also at DNA, which could have been left on various guardrails, handrails, on the gun. They'll look at the ballistics if they can find the bullet and see the lands and grooves of that bullet to see whether it matches that .30-06 that they found and other information. So this is a puzzle that you have to put together when you're a prosecutor, and I've been a prosecutor. It takes time. Now, fortunately, the full weight of the federal government has been cooperating, and they've already tested a lot of the information at the Quantico lab. And so this will take time, and obviously they're now seeking the ultimate punishment, which under Utah law has a certain aggravating factor, and the prosecutor just laid out what those aggravating factors are.
When you consider the two incidents of shooters targeting the president as well as Charlie Kirk, it points to a full-on attack on the Make America Great movement. Senator Lindsey Graham had this to say.
There is an effort by the radical left to dehumanize the MAGA movement. And I reject political violence. If you are offended by what somebody says or does, then take up a political cause to fight back, not a gun, not a bomb, not a knife.
Well, the White House says there's going to be an effort to track down and stop the left-leaning groups that traffic in hate and violence. What do you think they'll be able to accomplish?
Hard to tell at this point. Now, there's one thing between which we all cherish, protected First Amendment speech and the freedom of association, which I think everyone on the right and left should be able to agree on, and the expenditure of monies, which is lawful in most instances, supporting free speech and freedom of association. But you cross a line when that expenditure of money intentionally funds individuals who then, either by direction or by wink, wink, nod, nod, then engage in acts of violence or worse. And so I think when they impanel grand juries, when they do oversight hearings, and they get to the bottom of whether that money went to good things or intentionally bad things, we don't know the answer to that yet, but investigations are coming.
Well, I'm thinking of the other young man who gunned down the healthcare CEO in New York, Luigi Mangione. He has $1 million GoFundMe account now from people who are sympathetic to his cause, sick as that might be. Do you think Charlie Kirk's killer is going to get similar response, and is there anything that we can do about it legally?
Hard to tell, too early to tell, and in fact, I think if people want to fund a killer's defense, there's nothing illegal about it. I find it revolting and vomitous, personally. But remember, that the cop killers all across this country, especially like Mamua Abdul-Jabbar, who killed a Philadelphia police officer years ago, there's a sort of love me page for this guy. There's a movement behind this guy. And so there's always people who take the side of the murderer. And unless they're doing something besides just paying money, it's despicable, but it's lawful.
Well, there's other dangers on campus this fall. At least 10 schools have been victims of swatting incidents. Swatting is when someone calls in an active shooter threat to disrupt classes and scare the student body and staff. One of them happened a couple hours from here at the University of Tennessee in Chattanooga. An online site called Purgatory is taking credit for creating the chaos. It's a disturbing sign of the times where someone wants to be credit for chaos. What can you tell us, and what can be done to prosecute the people behind these incidents?
Yeah, and think about this, Alan. The first swatting incident, it happened in over a dozen schools, colleges, happened just after the Catholic school shooting case. So imagine the parents, and I'm a parent of college students, imagine the parents of those students getting the text from their kids, my school's on lockdown, there's an active shooting, and it was even worse because some of the swatters who called in had the sound, fake, of gunshots going on. So it was intentionally horrific to be sort of terrorizing these students. And so whether they use burner phones, whether they went through other proxies, whether they went through servers around the world that then bounced to the schools, I don't know. But we got to get to the bottom of it, and the people who did this need to be punished accordingly.
Well, these swatting calls are no joke. As I understand it, the penalty if convicted can be as much as 5 to 20 years. What are some of the other dangers when swatting incidents happen?
Well, it can be longer than 20 years too, because if, for example, under federal law, if somebody engaged in swatting and somebody died as a result of the swatting, you can imagine a person freaking out, thinking that there's shooting going on, running downstairs, tripping, falling, hitting their head and dying, or somebody breaks a leg, or somebody does something like that where they get injured, it can add to the exposure penalty-wise. And so this is terrible. Not only does it cause chaos and then potentially long-term mental health issues for the students and the faculty and the staff at the schools, but it's just disturbing overall. And so it is despicable, and these people deserve every day they get in prison if they're caught.
Amen. Well, Cully, I hope you'll stay with us for another segment. I'd like to discuss the president's plan for Memphis and your new book when we come back. I'd like to extend a personal invitation to join us for our Culture and Christianity Conference. It's September the 19th and 20th on our campus here at World Outreach Church, just outside of Nashville. We've chosen 3 specific topics to explore with a wonderful group of guests. We're going to talk about the church and our expected impact in this culture, the media and their impact in our culture, and then finally, our health, how we can be healthy in the midst of all these competing voices we're hearing. The real goal is how we take our faith and integrate it in our world so we have better lives, stronger families, and strengthen our nation. Join us for Culture and Christianity here in Murfreesboro. Well, we're back now with Charles Stimson, the Senior Legal Fellow at the Heritage Foundation. You've got a new book out called Rogue Prosecutors. There certainly seem to be a lot of them out there. No one knows better about that than President Trump. Tell us what you've learned about how bad things have become since Trump entered politics.
Yeah. So the Rogue Prosecutor movement, which is funded and conceived of by George Soros back in 2016, realized that the DA is the gatekeeper to the criminal justice system. He and he alone decides who gets prosecuted and who doesn't. And these are low-dollar, low-visibility races around the country. And so since there's 2,300 elected DAs, you can really sprinkle money very effectively around the country, which they've done. And even though there's 2,300, they've elected about 73 around the country. But that represents 68% of the population of the country. So you got one there in Tennessee, Steve Mulroy, got over $600,000 of Soros-affiliated money. And they have a playbook, and they all operate off the same playbook. Water down felonies to misdemeanors, don't prosecute misdemeanors, don't send violent juveniles to adult court, never ask for cash bail, don't ask for life without parole, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what happens when they do that? Crime explodes in their cities. And so this is a dastardly plan. And luckily, people like George Gascon in L.A., Chesa Boudin in San Francisco, Kim Foxx in Chicago, the first one in 2017, Marilyn Mosby in Baltimore, and some others have left office. The Mulroys are still there. The Jose Garzas down in Austin, Texas are still there. And so when Trump decides he's going to go into these red states with blue cities who have violent crime problems, he can cooperate and work with the governor to bring up their state guard, to second them to the local police to help make the arrests. The real question in Memphis is, they're going to make more arrests, they're going to get bad guys in handcuffs, but is Mulroy going to finally do his job? And when he doesn't, because they're not inclined to do it, that puts a spotlight on what the real problem is. He did that in D.C., that was great. He threatened Chicago. The Democratic governor wasn't going to play ball with the National Guard, and he probably was on pretty strong ground on that one. But in Tennessee and other red states with blue city murder problems, you can do that and you can isolate what the problem is.
You know, it seems to me we've got almost a toxic soup. Started with an open border, we had sanctuary cities. We have cities now that won't enforce ICE regulations. We have prosecutors that ignore the laws or the penalties for breaking the laws. This is a collection that makes all of us less safe, doesn't it?
100%. And now that Trump has secured the border and started an aggressive removal proceedings process, you still have those cities with what I call the toxic trio. Soros rogue prosecutor, the defund the police movement, or the ramifications of previous cuttings of their budgets, and then the dehumanizing and the demoralizing of the police force. D.C. here is down 800 officers from their expected workforce size. Other cities have defunded the police or cut back significantly. And then when, of course, crime goes up, they're like, wait, where's the police? Well, you city council, you county council people, you cut their budgets. And so, look, there's a tried and true way to fight crime. Ready? Prosecutors should prosecute, defense counsel should defend, judges should judge, police officers should be well-trained and well-funded. Boom. When that happens, and in cities where that happens, like San Diego County, where I used to be a prosecutor and where my wife was a prosecutor, they didn't have this massive crime spike like you saw back in 2017. And when the post-George Floyd riots happened, they didn't have a big spike. That's because they had that perfect setup of what you need to enforce good order and discipline and the law in those cities.
You know, you've already mentioned that George Soros and his son are behind the lax prosecutions that have helped create these dangers on the street. President Trump thinks he can begin to take down Soros. Listen to his comments.
We're going to look into Soros because I think it's a RICO case against him and other people. Because this is more than like protests. This is real agitation. This is riots on the street.
Help us understand what the president thinks he can do about Soros.
Well, read chapter 2 in our book. We focused entirely on the funding of the Soros rogue prosecutors. He spent about $50 million in direct campaign funding, which is a pittance, but about $1 billion with a B in indirect campaign funding just for the prosecutors alone. And so, yes, there's protected free speech. Yes, there's a freedom of association. Yes, I'm sure there's some lawful funding of lawful protests. But, you know, to the extent that the money is a quid pro quo, we'll give you this money if you engage in these violent acts, well, then you've crossed the line either at the federal level under RICO or the state line, or both. And so facts are stubborn things, as the old saying goes, and you have to develop the facts. And so you use grand juries, you use subpoenas, you use cooperators, you use wiretaps, you use all the lawful tools of the criminal justice system to get to the facts. And that's what needs to start taking place.
Well, I'd like to ask about a few other outstanding matters. Let's begin with the case that's being put together on Lisa Cook, the woman at the Federal Reserve who may have been involved in mortgage fraud. Do you think the case against her will eventually force her to resign?
Could. You know, what you've never seen or heard her say is, I didn't fill out those forms and lie. You've never heard her make an absolute denial. It's all about the process, or the process is due, or prejudging the case. But what I'm always interested in what's not said in these defenses, and I was a defense lawyer. I think it's great to be a defense lawyer. But you never hear her come out and say, I didn't do it. And so, yes, this appeals court judge for the time being has said, no, you can't remove her before the FOMC considers a BIP, a 25 BIP up in the interest rate, lowering the interest rates by 25 basis points this week. But sooner or later, she's going to have her moment. And what that moment means and the ramifications remain to be seen. But I think if you lie, like Marilyn Mosby, the Baltimore DA, did on her two mortgages she claimed were her primary residence in Florida, even though she's the state's attorney in Baltimore. She got indicted by the feds. The Biden Justice Department prosecutor, and she was convicted not only of perjury, but also mortgage fraud. And so I don't know what's in store in the future for Lisa Cook, but I've never heard her deny doing that.
Well, I always like to try to end on a good note. The Heritage office is right across the street from Union Station. Washington is safe now. Have you noticed a difference around town?
Yeah, I don't get high from secondhand marijuana smoke when I walk in there, and I don't get accosted by homeless people. And frankly, it doesn't matter about me because I'm a military guy, I grew up on a farm, I can handle myself. But the young staff here, especially the female staff who are our interns and colleagues, they feel safe there. And that says a lot. Now, look, D.C. still has a crime problem. Kudos to Trump and Jeanine Pirro, the U.S. attorney, for driving crime rates down. But we still have 107 murders. We still have over 3,000 carjackings in this city and car thefts. And so violent crime is down about 9% year over year. I'll be happy when the crime rate is at 0, because I think no murder is acceptable. And so there's a lot of work to do. But look, the House is considering passing some common sense crime legislation, like lowering the age of accountability for violent juveniles to 14 who can be prosecuted as adults. And by the way, 25 states have 14 and up, 10 states below 14, 3 states have 12 and up for the most violent crimes. So DC's out of step, and so they're headed in the right direction. And thank God for Trump and Pirro for pointing out, once again, where the weaknesses are.
Well, Charlie Stimson, thank you for your time today.
Thanks for having me, Alan.
We have learned a lot, and we hope to have you back again. We're going to read your book, Rogue Prosecutors. It looks intriguing to me. In a moment, I'll have some hopeful rays of light of my own, I promise. Hey, I want to give you a personal invitation to join my podcast, Culture and Christianity.
For a person to think that the Bible is not political, you don't know the Bible.
We're trying to understand how to take our faith outside the walls of the church and live it out in the marketplace.
He will show you what to do, whether it's in our communities, in our country, or other places in the world.
So I brought in some friends, some people that are trying to do this.
How could anyone call themselves Christian and be pro-choice? Is beyond my comprehension.
But I think he wanted them open and in need of him every day.
We have been living through a season of unprecedented deception, propaganda, manipulation.
Everybody says, oh, Israel is attacking schools in the Gaza Strip.
I want to be a part of seeing culture and Christianity intersect. Hope you enjoy the podcast. The assassination of Charlie Kirk took place at an outdoor event on a university campus in Utah. It was a state that has voted consistently Republican. You know, one would think a setting like that would be a safe haven for free speech and the freedom to assemble peacefully. However, before the event, an online petition was circulated asking university officials to prevent Charlie from speaking on campus that day. The petition stated, in part, that, quote, Charlie Kirk is known for his divisive rhetoric that often supports policies and laws which aren't inclusive and can marginalize various communities. The petition, it gathered more than 900 signatures. The climate surrounding our universities has to change. Our universities are intended to be places for a free exchange of ideas, not uniformity of thought. They've become indoctrination centers. Charlie focused on the young people. That's how I got to know him. He would listen to these college students, share his beliefs, and engage with them in a dialogue, a conversation, listening to their opinions. He was respectful of those who disagreed, even with those who spewed hatred at him with some really awful names. They'd call him fascist, Nazi, a purveyor of hate, a bigot, a whole host of other things. Well, those demanding that their viewpoints be tolerated were very aggressively intolerant of perspectives which differed from their own. We have a culture in crisis. A 22-year-old who disagreed with Charlie's biblical stance murdered him. Rather than engage in debate, he chose murder. And after the shooting, some rejoiced at Charlie's death. So what can we do? Well, I think one of the most important things we can do now is to present ourselves in public as a Christ follower, that we rearrange our calendars and our schedules and our habits and our patterns to be sure we identify clearly and publicly with Christ. If we'll do that, there's reason for hope. I'll be back with your emails. Thank you for taking the time to send us your emails. They're always a highlight of the program. Lupe from California commented, "I'm glad the issue is on health now. I appreciate that this issue is being highlighted to make the public more aware. You do have to ask the question of why Europe doesn't want any of our food. There are so many things added to our foods that it has become toxic. Americans are the most unhealthy people on earth. I hope and pray things will change for the better." Well, I agree. I think there's been a lot of disinformation, dishonesty, and just lying with regard to our food. Even the food we are supposed to eat, the recommendation's been coming to us. But there's some waking up taking place and good news entering the public square. Keep praying. I think there's better things ahead. Dixie from Texas wrote in, "Pastor Allen, I've been shocked at news reports from people, teachers, and politicians celebrating the death of Charlie Kirk. As more evil is exposed, I'm beginning to see why our kids and young people are so full of hatred." Well, I agree. There's some unsettling things being exposed about our universities and campuses. It's time for some changes in higher education. But when the light comes on, I believe there's an opportunity for a better future. Folks, if we'll keep choosing the Lord, I promise you there's reasons for hope ahead of us. Thanks for spending a few minutes with us. I'm Alan Jackson, and you have a wonderful evening.